Welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today, and man, we have a very awesome guest for y'all today. The one and only Nate Green. He is a award-winning CEO, best-selling author, a leadership coach, a founder who's made the Inc. 5000 list 4 years straight. He has an amazing superpower that we're going to find out, because this guy knows what he's doing. He's been doing it for years, and he knows how to crack the code of getting away from mediocrity and also unlocking the greatness that is always inside of you, the best version of yourself. We're going to learn not just about his amazing story. We're going to learn how does he understand his clients, because there's a connection there. And we're going to understand what it is that he's discovered throughout all these years doing the great things that he has done. He also has a book that I mentioned earlier, Suck Less, Do Better. Is right to the chase. We love cutting the fluff on this show, so I appreciate him making that happen, that book. But also, man, he has also been building 8-figure companies. He is building unstoppable mindsets. And I had to land this airplane so we can get right into the show with the guy, Nate. You have plenty more to go in your resume, but I just want to say welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Hey, man, I appreciate it. Doing great, man. It's a little rainy outside, but it's never rainy in our hearts. You know, you keep on chasing after it.
The amount of power you have on your resume, I know that sun is super bright. So when you think about the opportunities you've been blessed to have throughout your career, professional career, kind of start in the beginning of the story where you had a major health scare. I had to say that in the intro, but I think that definitely has a nice role in how you had the opportunity to have so much success.
You know, I love that's how we start, because, you know, a lot of times people want to look at your peaks. They want to look at your resume highlights, and they want to look at that stuff like, man, I wish I could. But you know what? It only comes through those turmoils. It comes through those heartaches. It comes through the pain points. And man, you know, going back to when I was 23 years old, I was actually paralyzed from a car accident. And then right after I recovered from that, I had heart failure and had to retire. I had to say goodbye to my passion of being a police officer, and really went through an extremely dark time. And even at one point, the doctors thought it was a degenerative issue where I potentially could only have 10 years left to live. And so as a 23-year-old man, that's a lot of darkness to have to sit in, and a lot of frustration, a lot of soul seeking to just be able to continue in those days. So, man, the journey was a dark time at 23 years old, before all these highlights that we're talking about here.
That's a powerful thing to observe as someone who's tuning in to us right now. When you understand that you could have quit a long time ago, you could have just settled and said, you know what? Geez, this is not how I plan my life to be. And you know what? It's all good. You didn't have that kind of mindset. You had this, I'm going to get myself unstuck, if you will, because a lot of times, especially entrepreneurs, we are in survival mode. And it's so easy to play that violin. Whoa, you don't know my stories. What made you get off of that seat and say, you know what? I'm still going to kick butt. I'm still going.
Man, you know, I tell you what, there's a lot of different reasons in there. But a part of it during the darkest days was, what could this story really mean at the end? And it was the fact that just because there were moments of hardships, that those weren't going to define my days. That wasn't going to define who Nate Green is. That's going to be defined by my actions today. And that's what still keeps me going is the resume that you read off. That doesn't define who I am. That's defined who I was still. Now, I still have to set and play day-to-day motion as to who I'm going to become. So then that way, when somebody 10 years from now is like, man, who's Nate Green? That's going to look completely different. That resume is going to change. It's going to update. And that's the thing, is it doesn't matter what I did, 5 years ago, 1 year ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, none of that matters. How am I showing up today?
Once again, let's on Refocused Radio, talking to our guest today. Go to his website, successwithnategreen.com. Let's get into your book, because I think that is a punchline that I know is no shot that is a bestseller. I mean, that that's a great title that you came up with. Kind of share with us what was the process like for you putting the whole project together for Suck Less, Do Better.
It was funny because when a publisher reached out to me at the end of 2023 and was really trying to talk about a potential book option, and we talked for a little bit, and I said, hey, listen, like there's really only one title I want to kick out there. And so, if you're not interested in it, then I don't really want to move forward. And I pitched them on Suck Less, Do Better. And they were excited, but then I told them the reason. In the whole process here, the term Suck Less, Do Better, it has a little bit of a sharp stab. It has a little bit of a bite to it, but it's actually been my daily encouragement for all but the first 3 years of my entrepreneur journey. So that started, probably about 15 years ago. And the issue at the time is I was getting distracted. I was getting distracted by, the failures. I was getting distracted by the competition with other people. I was getting distracted by other people's goals, other people's ambitions. And so I had to change gears. I had to sit there and say, Nate, how are you going to focus every single day, living each day based upon a better version of you today than how you showed up yesterday? And so I started telling myself at the beginning of every day, suck less, do better. Do better than you showed up yesterday. Suck less than you did yesterday. Figure out how to do today as Nate Green better than yesterday. And constantly moving the incremental steps forward as becoming the best version of me. That was my constant reminder, man. That was my hype message. That was my you fail at something, you're like, suck less, do better. Like you got to learn from it, grow from it, adapt from it, and then be better on the other side of it. And so that was kind of this mental motto that I had for the last 15 years. And so when they approached me, I said, hey, this is what it's going to be. And they're like, we love it. So then it was just a whole process of putting together the roadmap throughout the book to layer it all the way to the end, which the final chapter talks about those incremental changes about becoming a better version of you. But yet I wanted to solve some real world problems that entrepreneurs go through.
Also in the book, in the first part, you help the reader to define their suck. And I think that's important because we all heard on every single podcast show, every motivational speech, whatever, about being self-aware. But you go in detail of how they can actually identify the actual issues that maybe they overlooked. Kind of explain why that is important for people to actually start at that point. Where actually are you having those issues?
Yeah, because the issues always stem from slight adjustments. And so if you really define who you don't want to be, or maybe who you're prone to slide back into, and you really define that, and then that way you can make sure that that always stays in your rear view mirror versus in your windshield. And so without defining that, how easy is it to start making subtle changes in your life? The next thing you know, you're really like sliding backwards. But if you define it and you define the action or what it looks like and all those kind of things, then you become way more aware that if you're not chasing after what I call your lighthouse, and if you actually start derailing, what does that look like? But when you define yourself, man, you want to chase in the opposite direction. You want to go after your lighthouse. You want to be very aware of those different actions.
When you think about sharpening your focus, also in the book, you help readers set big, bold goals. For you, kind of define what is a bold goal and when do you believe a person can be doing too much?
I never believe that people can be chasing after too much, but I think people can be doing too much in their day because sometimes those become distractions from the real goal. So, people are just moving through life just to move through life, and they've never really set their lighthouse, that forever goal. Then you have nothing to measure anything against. How are these actions in line with this forever goal? And so that becomes that bar or that measuring stick for all your actions in your life.
When you think about just the journey you are on today versus before you had these aha moments, what is the old person like comparison to the current person?
Man, I would say that the current person is very focused. it's very focused on my purpose, my mission. Like, what is life really about? It goes beyond just stats. It goes beyond just awards. It goes beyond just some money in the bank. It goes beyond just trying to find some freedom. It's more a matter of what are you going to do with that freedom? And that's what keeps me motivated. That's what keeps me driven. And I'll be honest with you, I feel like God really blessed me with financial freedom through this last transaction of selling my businesses and then all this success. But I actually feel more pressure and more weight now than I ever have. Because when you're entrusted with something so great, now it's like, what are you going to do with it? And I think that's what keeps me really locked in, motivated, driven. And my wife's even like, man, you could slow down a little bit. I'm like, no, I can't, because God gave me this freedom. Now I got to maximize the impact I can have with this freedom. Like, who can I reach? Who can I go after? What can I do? What should I be doing? That way I can make sure and provide hope to the people that don't have hope, provide guidance to those people that really need a direction, really help people break free from their holdback so they can go after a better future.
Once again, listening on Refocused Radio and talking to our guest today, Nate Green. Go to his website is successwithnategreen.com. My follow-up question is, I love what you said about pressure. I think when a person is honest with themselves, pressure doesn't go away. It's almost like a accountability partner. It keeps you on your toes. So when you think about the success you have with building teams, making 8-figure, that is something that is not for the faint of heart. That is something that you have to have some principles. So kind of share with us, were there some core principles that you used during those times, even now that you're in a position to give back more?
The first thing is really to really know you. I think so many people, and this goes to coaches, this goes to authors, this goes to a lot of people, they focus on action steps. And action steps are great. But if you don't really know who you are, and you really don't know what's really holding you back, then how can you really chase after building a team or building a business or scaling a practice or scaling a coaching practice, whatever the case may be? It doesn't matter what you're chasing after. If you don't first take the time to really go back and learn you, then how can you really implement you the best? And so once you really start understanding what that looks like in practical application, the truth goes back to the people around you, the team members you're trying to hire. What do you really need in your weaknesses versus your strengths? What do you really need for your team's weaknesses? And so it's like a jigsaw puzzle of really trying to chase after a greater future with really learning to understand each piece that you're going to put in place. Each piece is a person, a team member. Where is that going to help you? How is that going to grow? Don't just hire because they pulse. Figure out exactly what you need to counterbalance to really chase after that next level.
When you think about challenges, that it always comes. It's not like it's not coming. It's just a matter of when. What were some of the things that you were able to learn from setbacks, if you will, that position you to not just do better, but to create systems to where you can kind of prevent some of the patterns of those headaches?
Man, I tell you what, man, I failed a lot, like a lot in my first, let's say 3 to 5 years in business. Man, I was constantly moving too fast. And sometimes that's great, but it's a matter of like, if you take a step back and really strategically plan the moves, like a chess master, they can see so many steps ahead. And I think so many times as entrepreneurs, we struggle with shiny object syndrome. And shiny objects doesn't just mean like new businesses, new ventures. Sometimes it could be new directions inside of your business. And so I had to make some major changes at about year 5 and really figure out, okay, what was working, what was failing, what was working with what I was doing, and how was I failing? And it really came down to the team models. It's more of understanding those different aspects of the driving forces, really understanding where people's skill sets sit. How can somebody be leveraged the best in the process? And how can I maximize my time? I mean, I'll be honest with you. At one point, I hired somebody to sit across my desk and stare at me all day long. Why? Because I needed to learn how to delegate better. And so if I had somebody like this camera staring at me all day long, then it became like, hey, is this project a me project? Is it a he or she project? Or is it a we project? Where it became that art of trying to figure out, hey, listen, should I do this? Should I delegate this? Or should I train this? And so each single step, working through, that was probably one of the best decisions I ever made, is really learning how to use different tools and then really understanding different personality types and even have them in my physical office. It didn't even matter. Even when I sold my business, at the end, I still had somebody physically in my office with me. Why? Best productivity, the best way you learn, the best way you grow. At one point, I had 4 other people in my physical office with me, 4 different personality types, or 4 different skill sets, and really understanding people and how to leverage and use, maximize, and then really how to delegate with the right tools.
People are always searching for what's the answer. I mean, just look at it when we are on our social media pages, on the feed, they call it the scroll of death. It's easy to just be so worried about, wow, this is working for so-and-so. Why is it not working for me? Or that's always a trap. How have you as a leader in business been able to stay away from those traps? Not saying that you had a couple of days that you got caught up in it, but how do you have that focal point to be aware to, okay, I got to get away from this?
It's that measuring stick. You got to have a measuring stick of your day. And in order to have that, you have to have the measuring stick of your life. And if you've not really connected to your purpose, you haven't figured out what your lighthouse is supposed to look like, what are you really going after, then how can you really look down at the moment? And in those moments, be like, how am I supposed to spend this time? And so when you're looking at your time and you do look backs, I have a coaching client right now that we're doing 15-minute increments to see where his time is slipping away from him. And so when we're talking about time tracking, we're talking about purpose, we're talking about this measuring stick. After we get all these things in place, then we figure out where you're prone to go. And if you're like, oh man, I got to have social media, have 2 phones. One that's with you at all times, one that you only go to for that purpose. Yeah, spend the extra $30, $40 a month. I don't care. Because if you can save yourself the time, so you have your discipline. If I'm shooting content, posting content, commenting, whatever, cool. Here's the phone for that. Besides that, during all your productivity time, that phone should be somewhere else. It should be nowhere around you. So you're talking about discipline, you're talking about focus, you're talking about measuring sticks, you're talking about making sure that you are dedicated to your process. Remember, social media is built for entertainment, which means it's built to catch and hold your attention. What it's not built to do is to teach you how to be successful. How people are trying to leverage it, are trying to educate. That's great. But it's built to get you sidetracked, to get you stuck on there. Maybe it's what's crushing your time and keeping you from achieving your greatest.
Appreciate you saying that, because I heard a lot of people talk about they just turn their phone off and they're like, there's a time and place for it, but at this certain time of the day, it goes completely off. I've been doing that lately. Just be honest. I found that to be very useful to set a time where I just want to just be like, I'm not available. You can hit me up tomorrow morning because I'm not checking my messages. And I feel that boundary is healthy. And for that, I want to talk about the programs you have, Built Unstoppable and also Out of the Suck. If you can, for our audience, kind of explain what is involved in both programs.
Yeah, the biggest and the best, in my opinion, is Built Unstoppable, because we go through a lot of fundamentals. And this is where, how can you really set the trajectory for your life without fully knowing you? And so that's where we go back to what I call the basics. To a lot of people, it's not, because we dive hard into studying you. If you're going to write research paper, how much time do you spend researching? If you're going to launch a business, how much time do you spend researching and learning and growing? If you're going to get an education, what does that look like? Go to a career, what does it look like? How much time do you spend learning you? And I think that's what crushes so many people, is they launch businesses, they move in directions, and they completely miss that core fundamental of who am I in this process? And that's where we take them back to that core fundamental at the beginning of the program, We walk them through understanding their skill sets, their capabilities, setting the display of who they really can become. And then we start moving into implementation. Okay, well, if this is who I can become, then with that person, what could they achieve? And then you start looking at it from a different perspective, like, man, like that person is great. They could go after X, Y, and Z. And then what we do is start setting trajectories and creating your lighthouse and eliminating your holdbacks. I talk a lot about cracked lenses, which you can see from childhood, past relationships, trauma, drama, difficulties that can really derail the way you see yourself and your future potential. So we dive hard into that, push into the noises that distract you and derail you, and then go all the way to focus action steps and really help you walk through and get case studies to really understand how this stuff can look in your life and really push you all the way through out to success roadmaps. And then that way you are moving and chasing forward. The Out of the Suck program is a fun program. This is something that right now we're doing one-on-one. We're not doing that in groups yet because it's very intimate. It's very detailed, but that's something that we are working on the finishing out of the program because it's helping people going from, hey, listen, I've identified who I am. I really know that this is not where I'm supposed to be. And they're like, I need to go there. But what does that transition look like? You know, I relate it to like leaving an ex-girlfriend. Like sometimes when you leave this ex-girlfriend and you start moving over here, what happens when the road gets difficult, that ex-girlfriend starts looking better. And you're like, well, wait a second, I'm lonely, I miss her, this, that, and the other. And you're like, okay, and you have a tendency of sliding back. Out of the Suck program helps you move from here and identify where you're going before you take that first step. That way the steps and the sequences are all in line to help you get to whatever this is as fast as possible, as successful as possible, with the least amount of damage in the journey. So then that way you can be as confident, and then you limit the risk of going back to that nasty ex-girlfriend over here or ex-boyfriend, whatever the case may be.
That's a great point because we think about what we talked about earlier with challenges. The other thing comes to mind is alignment. I believe once you get to a certain point, you also discover not only what works best for you in the situation, but you also have awareness of when you're out of pocket, if that makes sense. So for our audience, kind of touch on what do you feel keeps you in your system, if that makes sense, because sometimes getting out of pocket, it can just be because life happens or just because we have bad habits. But for you, I mean, your resume is amazing. How were you able to stay in alignment and know at what point I need to return back home base?
You know, it's having the home base. You know, that's the key, is what is it that helps you stay centered? You know, for me, it's always trajectory of growth, trajectory of my time management. What about my delegation skills? What about these different principles that I'm going to put in place to become successful? And most of the time, people start finding success, and then they want to celebrate their successes, and they go out and buy a fast car, and they do all these things as if they've hit their final goal. And it's great, like reward yourself, but reward yourself at the right time when you actually hit success, not when you're on the process of. And so I basically created all these principles for me. Like once I started my first business and I got a little derailed in my first 2 years, I set a trajectory of no more other businesses until I hit 10 years of business. I wanted to make sure that that first business had the longest run to be able to hit the highest success. And that, in turn, really helped me stay hyper-focused as an entrepreneur, shut out all the noise, and really stay focused. And so with that, like you talk about principles, you talk about having your notebooks, having whatever it is for you. Some people put things up on a board, they put a bunch of pictures. I'm not a big fan of that because it's like building a false life. I like to stick to reality of what does today look like? What is it supposed to stay looking like? And that's what at the end of the day, you look back at the prior day and you say, wait a second, how did I stay true to these principles? And then you take a plan of action. Wait a second, I failed and I derailed. Cool, we're all gonna fail and derail. How do I get back on track? And so you put that process in. And for me, like my morning routine is vital. I get up, I read the Bible, I study different books, I work on listening to podcasts. I educate. I call it the feed before the deplete. You first got to feed and fill yourself up before you then go pour yourself out into businesses, conversations, relationships. Now, man, you got to fill yourself up. So if that's where it starts, that's the time to connect to your principles for that day, for that year, for that month, and then really start taking action with a focused direction.
Wow. All right. I see. That's awesome. I love what I'm hearing right now, because a lot of times you can have a lot of noise out there, and there's a lot of buzzwords. I like that you are finding the nails and hitting it with the hammer. I appreciate that for our audience. Once again, listen to Refocused Radio, watching us online, talking to Nate Green. Go to his website, successwithnategreen.com. If you got a lot from this, I hope you did. Share with a friend and listen to it again. I know I'm going to be listening to this multiple times. Put in your favorites, bookmark it. And I want to say for you, before we close, if there's anything you want to plug, any events in the future or best ways for people to stay in contact with you and connect with you for business, how can they do so?
Man, you've already thrown it out there. The website, Success with Nate Green. We're going to be updating that. I have another book coming out in about 4 months, which is incredible. I'm excited about it. And we got a cool project that's going to go along with it to really give people hope, encouragement, direction, and a solid foundation to build off of, man. It's an exciting process. And I tell you what, I appreciate the support, having me on this show. This is incredible. And then just being a part of the journey.
Well, like I always want to say to you, thank you, Nate, for your time, man.
Thank you. Appreciate you.